Behind every headline in Europe, there's a policy, a debate, and a decision. This is EU Decoded, a podcast by the EPP Group in the European Parliament, in which we take you through those decisions.
Today we are going to discuss the drone threat that grows across Europe and the response of the European Union. In the studio today, I welcome the members of the European Parliament. On my left is Mrs. Angelika Niebler, welcome. On my right, I have Mr. Andrey Novakov from Bulgaria. You are a member of the Committee on Security and Defense, and you negotiated Parliament's resolution on a united response to recent Russian violations of the EU member states. I forgot to say, Mrs. Niebler, you are also a member of the Committee on Industry, Technology, Research and Energy. And together with us is going to be also Mr. Pekka Toveri. He is a member of the European Parliament from Finland, and he is member of the Committee on Security or Defense. But before we start with our discussion, let's listen to Radosław Sikorski, the Deputy Prime Minister of Poland, what he said during the recent EPP Group's meeting in Gdansk.
The most urgent business seems to be countering drone operations. Drones are cheap, plentiful, and you can do a lot of damage with them. And we need to investigate what happened in Copenhagen and other places, and we need to build the drone wall that President von der Leyen proposed, and that should contain of our own drones, but also anti-drone capacities. But there are also other forms of hybrid warfare, as you know. So we have arsons. We just need to get the arsonists, and we need to collaborate across borders among the security services. Of course, we need to catch and convict the murderers conducting hits. And I believe we should also restrict the movements of Russian diplomats across national borders. They should only be able to be in the country of their accreditation. We have over 2,000 Russian diplomats, a sizable proportion of them service agents. We should make it more difficult for them.
We have the Polish Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Novakov. The first question goes to you. The EPP has called for a stronger European defense, including investment in dual-use technologies, future technologies like drones and artificial intelligence. The Commission announced plans for a drone initiative or a drone shield. But what do you think? How unified is the EU's approach to drone initiative, or this drone shield? Are all member states equally committed, or are there divisions behind the scenes?
I wouldn't say that there is division, because we slowly but surely starting to understand that this is not an issue only for Ukraine or only for Poland, because this has happened several times in Munich, in the heart of Germany. It happens in Copenhagen. It happens in many different European airports, so there is no secure place. And no matter how we call it, people should know that the European Union is planning to build a defense system against drones on the eastern flank in NATO, which is covering all the way the border, starting from Finland down to the Turkish-Bulgarian border in Black Sea. And this is not going to cost billion. Here we are prepared for this asymmetric approach that the Russian Federation is having, because it was a very, I would say, important test that we had when the drones entered the Polish airspace, and the way we reacted, it was adequate, but just for short-term operation. We are not going to defend ourselves with 100 million F-35 against a $15,000 Shahid drone. So our drone wall, our drone shield, is going to be conducted in a way with acoustic sensors, which are not costing billion. We are talking about tens of millions of euro, which is cheap and very effective. They are hard to be detected in traditional radars, but they create a lot of noise. They are using a simple motoped, two-stroke petrol engines, which is quite noisy from a negative point of view, and it's really easy to be detected far away. So it should be shut down, as we call it in our resolution last plenary, already before entered the airspace of Europe. Why is that? Because even if we shut down this drone, and the debris lands on somebody's house, is still going to make damages. So finally, and I'm concluding with this, when it comes to drones and defense system that we are developing, there is a purely administrative burdens that we have to overcome. At the moment, if we take Munich, for example, and the airport in Munich, if there is a drones above the airport, then it's not the airport authorities, because they are responsible for the runway. When it comes to the airspace, they have to call the air traffic control. The air traffic control has no means to take down drones. They have to call the police. When the police comes, the drone is far away. The army could not intervene because it's a civil airport. This is not Ramstein air base. So we have to clear this. We have to be prepared that when this happens, we have immediate response and taking down those drones. And finally, there is one big question, although it sounds like an administrative detail, but if you shut down a drone over an airport and that debris of the drone landed on the plane and damaged the plane, then who is going to be responsible for paying the cost and, if God bless, not to have any casualties. So this is an issue as well. So even if the drone is not armed, it's still causing troubles, it's still an imminent threat to the life of those who are living on the ground.
Mr. Toveri, you are not only a politician, but as far as I know, you are a former general in the Finnish armed forces. The European Parliament wants a tighter coordination and a unified legal framework for cross-border drone interception. NATO, at the same time, is integrating counter-drone capabilities into Baltic and Black Sea surveillance missions. How closely will the drone plans of the Commission link up with NATO's defense infrastructure? And could maybe an overlapping mandates cause some friction?
Well, that's the interesting question and not so easy to answer. I'd say that we should be very careful not to overlap and step to NATO boundaries. EU is not a defensive organization. We are building a defensive union, but we are far away from that. NATO has been there over 80 years, and they have the command structure for the defense of Europe. Same time, you have to remember that in these kind of cases, when we are not in a war yet, Article 5 is not in use, it's a national responsibility to take down the drones. So there's a lot of things I think that we need very good close cooperation and coordination between NATO and EU in these issues. And I see EU's role more like creating tools for national authorities and the NATO to then tackle the actual problem. It's, as we heard from the previous discussion, that the command arrangements and who has powers in what situation are complicated enough already without having EU participating in it.
I have a special question. Who has actually the last word in shooting down or tracking the drones? But we'll come to that a little bit later. I have a question to Mrs. Niebler. Mrs. Niebler, earlier this month, we know what happened in Munich airport. It had to stop the operation. A lot of flights have been cancelled because of multiple drone sightings. The EPP Group has highlighted the need to address all these hybrid threats and strengthen the resilience, including protection of critical infrastructure such as airports. How can we do that? And all these plans of the Commission about this drone initiative, Mr. Novakov said that it will not be that expensive. What is your opinion? How much is it going to cost, and who's paying at the end the bill?
Well, actually, what happened in Munich and in other member states is really alarming. In Munich, we did not only detect drones over the airport, but also, we have a military base in Manching, and we also detected drones there. So that's really alarming, because this military base, which we have there, we use it now for civilian purposes, but also, for instance, Airbus Defence and Space is conducting flights there. So this has really been alarming for us. Well, actually, what can we do? I make a reference to Andrew. You pointed perfectly right out. There are a lot of questions which have to be tackled. We have to check the competences, who is in charge for what, actually. That is also, one lesson which we learned from Munich. Is it the police who is in charge, actually the police forces? Or, well, in Germany, you cannot use military forces, armed forces internally within your territory, only in very rare and exceptional cases. Is it, the provider who runs the facility? So I think these are questions which we have to discuss and where we have to find a solution. And, well, what can be be done. We have to do everything to be best in detecting drones. We need our own drones, for being capable to react. And I'm positive, or I'm optimistic, because what I've learned, that also in my region we have a lot of startups, working in the drone technology field. And my feeling is, we have the skills, we are good in development. We have a lot of ideas, a lot of startups who can deliver what we need actually, but we have to scale up now the production. That is what is needed. And the question of cost, it's very difficult to answer. I think no one knows the exact figures. You mentioned that. Andrey, you said it will not be so cost intensive. I don't know, when you start and when you think about maybe sensor technology, which is necessary, if you have some sort of weapon integration, satellite communication, if all is taken together, I think it will cost us quite a lot. Well, that's also an issue we have to discuss in Europe if we want to go for a drone initiative. I'm strongly, I think, like my colleagues, campaigning that this is going to be a common European project.
Where we are going to find the funds for this initiative? There are a lot of plans, but where are we going to find all the money?
Well, I always get the difficult questions. It seems to me. No. Well, this is also something which we have to carefully consider. We are right now at the beginning of discussing the next multi-annual financial framework. So I think we agreed on shifting the priorities. Defense. Security in Europe is key, number one priority. We have to do everything in order to strengthen our competitiveness in the European Union. So I think, the MFF is one source of money where we can have a look at it. And the European Investment Bank is, I think, also in charge of it. They changed the policy. Formerly, defense activities have not been financed by the EIB. And, well, let's be creative, Member states do not have a lot of money, If you look at the budgets there, I think we will not get much money, but we have to look at the MFF, our financial framework, and see how the money is going to be allocated. And I hope that we put a lot of money into security and defense, because I think that's key also for our European Union.
Mr. Toveri, I come back to you. Germany has already authorized its police to shoot down hostile drones. As far as I know, Finland, France, and Poland, they have updated their protocols regarding drones. But let's take a real-life scenario. What can happen if, let's say, hundreds of drones simultaneously violate the airspace of 3, 4, or 5 member states? Who makes the call? Who says to shoot down the drones? The national authorities, an EU-level command center. And once a suspicious drone is detected, what happens next? Who decides? Shall we shoot it down, or shall we just neutralize and track it?
Bunch of good questions. This is a very complicated issue because, again, as said, it's mainly the national responsibility, and all the nations have different legislation and systems. For Finland, for example, the defense forces gives about 500 times a year executive assistance to the police, including use of force if needed, including use of deadly force if needed. That's according to our laws. So it's much easier for us in Finland, the police, to ask, well, please shoot this and that down, because we practice it all the time too. So it's not going to be EU, I don't think so, at least for a little while. And then exactly how are we going to take them down? Because, Mr. Newton came up with this irritating law that everything you shoot up comes down. And as mentioned, it can hit innocent people. So what are you going to do? Using electronic warfare? Well, it doesn't necessarily work if it's a wire-guided UAV or drone, or if it's working on artificial intelligence-based system. So you can't use EW. You can maybe use electromagnetic pulse, but that will take down a lot of other things too if you are not careful. And then using actually kinetic weapon systems. It's always, okay, this is the last resort because to protect something very valuable. So it depends on the issue, and most cases probably we would just follow it through if it's not threatening anything vital. But we need, and these are two different things. I think in the border areas, close to the Russian border, it's easier, and we can create systems there where, as mentioned, the most important thing is to locate them, to have a situational awareness where they are coming. And then we can use also kinetic systems in the border areas when they're coming over the border, and it's much easier to make for decision making. But then when you talk about München or Copenhagen, deep in Europe. I don't think that the numbers is that big, because to smuggle a number of drones to Central Europe and start doing stuff is not so easy. So we need maybe a different kind of solution, not so much military force. We need counterintelligence work so that we can locate those actors who are trying to smuggle the drones into the operations. We need to harden our facilities, our infrastructure, so that they can be taken down with one single drone, as the Ukrainians are learning to do now. And then, yes, very thorough discussion between our national authorities, who can do what and when, and practice. And that's the thing. The things don't work unless you have exercised. How do you do it in a very fast-paced situation? And then we can do. But I think that in the beginning it will be totally on the national authorities. And then if we ended up in Article 5 situation, then NATO steps in. But even then, I think that deep in Europe, it's a national decision-making. NATO don't have a capability to run all over Europe, protecting us against drones.
Mr. Novakov, the European Commission presented fast-track plans for this European initiative. What do you think? This will be a truly European defense system managed by Brussels, or rather a patchwork of national projects?
I think we don't have to invent the wheel and creating a whole new architecture that should function in wartime. For that we have NATO, and it functioned perfectly well for the past 75 years, even more. So if we manage to implement supporting measures in already existing protocols and architecture of NATO, that would be the best scenario. It was very rightly mentioned by Mr. Toveri that NATO has no capability of dealing with internal issues, especially with that scale. And you don't have to, because taking down two-stroke propeller drone does not necessarily require an F-35, which is going to be commanded somewhere in Ramstein or in different place. So I think that they should be way cheaper and a simpler way to react with national air forces and the national air defense systems that could exist on every international airport, up to my knowledge and recollection. So on the question where the money will come from, recently we announced so much different European initiatives funded by EU in different way, with financial markets, funds in the form of loans, with the leftovers of the cohesion policy, with dual usage production funded by Horizon, for instance. So we have resources. Here, I'm tempted by history and would like to say that never before a war or either attack or defense capacity was built with a budget resources. Always has been loans taken and then later paid off in a long term with a very low interest. And that should be the case here, and is not going to be a disaster for our budgets. I mean, this is the reality. It's not up to us. We cannot build this wall. We cannot build the defense capacity of Europe and then just watch and register the number of drones landing somewhere in Poland first, then the 3 planes flying over Estonia, then the airports, then what's next?
Yes.
And one issue is that when does this end? Well, as long as Russia don't pay anything, it's not punished for its actions, it will never end. But when we put a price on it, then it has an effect. Every time there's a drone coming from Russia to the EU or NATO airspace, we'll send 100 million or billion from frozen assets to Russia, Ukraine or something, or put more sanctions. But that's a problem. We don't have any attribution these latest actions. We've talked about that this is not fair, but we haven't done anything.
We have a very good example here. There was only once when a Russian plane flew over Turkey. We know what happened with the plane and never repeated again. That was a very understandable language that is well perceived in Kremlin.
And the Russian frozen assets, I think the Commission is right now working how to mobilize also these Russian assets, always accepting, of course, we have international financial rules, and we know that Belgium is very nervous about how that is going to be governed. But at the end of the day, I think we have to use these assets as well. And there are a lot of, things, discussions going on how we can do that in compliance, of course, with international rules.
Mrs. Niebler, the last question goes to you. These plans of the European Commission, they're ambitious, I must say. They say that they have to be fully operational by the end of 2027. What do you think? Do we have enough industrial capacities to produce the systems on time? And do we have all the key components we need in Europe, or still these components, they have to come from abroad?
Well, first of all, I think we have to be ambitious. The threats are there, they are real, and we have to do everything in order to be ready. The earlier, the better. So I think we have no alternative in that respect. Second, I think, Europe is well positioned in terms of development. I think we have good people, we have companies, we have undertakings who are ready, who can deliver. But of course, we have to see what materials have to be used, raw materials in particular, which components have to be, where the important components are coming from. So the whole value chain, we have to take into account that everything works quite well. There, I think we still can improve our situation. But the Commission also, and we endorsed that, we have a plan how we do that. We are right now also in the world, agreeing on trade terms, also with other countries in the world. So with India, for instance, we are close in getting a free trade agreement. So there might be also a good challenge. We had this Mercosur agreement, which had been concluded just a couple of months ago. So I think we have to reach out in the world and look for trustworthy partners there, where we can also agree on terms, which minerals, which raw materials we are going to take. Again, we, the European Union, we also have interesting components and products to deliver, so I think it can be a win-win situation. But for me, the most important thing is, and that's what I wanted to close with, we have to hurry up. We do not have to lose time, so let's speed up, let's do the things which are obvious that they have to be done. And let's start, let's just do it, not talk about it all the time, but just do it. Where we need European approaches and European solutions, let's move for that. That's not the command structure. I fully agree on what you both have said, that NATO, is our backbone, our security hub, yeah? But strengthening the European pillar, I think that is key, and that's what we all are heading for.
And that wraps up this episode of EU Decoded. Mrs. Niebler, Mr. Toveri, Mr. Novakov, thank you very much for sharing your opinions and insights on the issue. And we hope to see more concrete results on the drone initiative. Thank you very much.
And that's it for this episode of EU Decoded. Make sure to follow the EPP Group on social media, stay informed, stay engaged, and join us next time as we unpack other EU topics.